Beware, I live.
We are back with another special episode of the Double Plus Good Games podcast. And what makes this so special in comparison to the many other shows we've done, this is our second one brought to you by Amazon.com. So we're very proud this evening. We have our second set of guests on, that being Dark Vale Games, and their recently released Forge for PC, which you're going to learn a lot more about in the upcoming hour.
So, quick question. Has anybody been able to get into the beta for this? Has anybody tried this game out?
Mm-hmm.
Oh, you have?
Sure have.
That is excellent. I got to play it tonight, but let me know what you think.
Right now?
Well, it's
Kidding.
going to be like in 5 minutes we're going to have them on, but I definitely, I was at the Super Genius housewarming party tonight, and Super Genius was responsible for the graphics, the design, the character, what the characters look like, what their equipment looks like, what the menu systems look like.
Was art direction done by Dark Vale, or was art direction done by Supergiant?
So that's a good question to ask, right? So I know that Dark Vale gave Super Genius carte blanche to go wild with it.
Oh, because the game looks great.
It looks phenomenal. I was super impressed with what I was looking at. I initially thought it was going to be like an MMO, like a Warcraft from the screens that I saw, but when I saw it in play, it reminded me like of an Unreal Tournament
Yes.
type of game. PvP.
PvP.
You want to know what I think about Forge?
What do you think of Forge?
It's multiplayer combat at its best. An incredible blend of MMO-style abilities and FPS controls. No grind, no treadmill, just skill.
And you know what? That's funny too, because it isn't a first-person shooter. It's over the shoulder, almost like a Resident Evil. I'd say it's a little bit further back than Resident Evil, but it plays like a first-person shooter.
I agree. I like the way it's set up because I like to be able to see when I should jump. If I'm doing some jumping shenanigans, I like to be able to see where my feet are so I know exactly when the best time to jump is. It just helps me with timing as opposed to an Unreal Tournament where I don't know where my feet are. And so, like, I don't know if I'm am I trying to jump and I've already stepped off the ledge and I'm in the air? Am I trying to jump from like 5 feet back off the ledge? I guess it's a timing thing, but it's a timing thing that I never really sat down to learn. So I prefer the third person a lot better.
And for those who don't know, tuning into the Double Plus Good Games podcast, Forge is a class-based multiplayer shooter set in a distinct fantasy universe. We're going to learn more about that and have that fleshed out here momentarily.
All right, gents, we got a lot to talk about.
Please don't say that.
Okay, I'm adding him right now.
Connecting to co-founder and chief technical officer of Dark Vale Games, Tim Alvis. In 3, 2, 1.
Hello, is this Timothy Alvis?
Yes, it is.
First off, you sound great.
Okay.
But is it Tim or Timothy?
Tim's great.
Yes, that would be great. I just came back from the Super Genius party.
Okay.
I'm sure you're aware of that, but they had the open house tonight. And
They had an awesome cake.
yeah, so you saw that. That was absolutely awesome in person. I've got pictures myself that aren't Instagrammed, so I'll send those to you after the show.
That sounds great. Yeah, they texted over images of the cake.
So I would like to introduce you. We've also on the call, we've got Anthony Ernst.
Hey, how's it going, Tim? I want to welcome you to the show, and it's a pleasure to have you on.
Thanks. It's a pleasure to be here.
Thank you.
We also have Mr. James Bacon.
Hey, Tim, how you doing?
I'm doing all right. Nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you as well.
Welcome to the show, and thank you for taking time out on a Friday evening to sit down and talk a little bit about Forge.
It's no trouble at all.
So, Tim, can you tell us a little bit about Dark Vale Games?
Yeah. We haven't been around the industry as long as some, but we were sort of sitting on the outskirts, always developing, either children's titles or middleware applications, that sort of thing. Always had the conversation of if only we could start our own game studio, here are the things we would do. And finally, after enough work on other people's projects and enough confidence building with the right partners, we were given the opportunity to actually start a studio. So we had 3 game concepts that we were bouncing around. The current one is the one that sort of won out for several reasons. So we opted to start the company, and that was really in December. So the company founded in January.
Wow.
Yeah, so we had to go through, gather talent, finalize documentation. I mean, a lot of the documentation had been worked on for years as we discussed these game concepts. We've kind of traveled from company to company together. But certainly finishing up the documentation was sort of the first task. Getting a prototype up was imperative to do really, really quickly to meet a launch date for the same year that you start your company. So we were testing the game before we had even any art assets. I mean, we were still doing concept art, and we were running around playing Forge with robots and other Unreal Tournament and UDK-based assets that we could get for free just to sort of flesh out the mechanics, which played a really large role in making sure that things felt solid by the time the art came in.
Now, I actually got to play your game, and I am flabbergasted. Now, I've been around long enough, and I've seen game development time go from 12 months to 18 months to the new generation, which is 24 and 36 months. But you're saying that you started a company and in the same year have a product that looks as good as Forge. How is that even possible?
It was, I think it's really strange. We sort of gained a reputation before starting this company. The reason we traveled around together sort of from company to company is it's kind of hard to explain. When you get to know somebody, you kind of know how quickly they work on something, how fast they can accomplish a task. And we just started becoming known for jumping in and getting things done really, really quickly at a quality level. It means that you strip features. I mean, it's one of the most difficult parts is keeping that discipline of not trying to do everything up front. But I think what really helped was just having that team in place that is comfortable working together, comfortable kind of working on strict timelines, that has the willingness to say no to each other. That way things actually stay on track. I think a big reason why a lot of these projects have ballooned from 12 months to 36 months and more is just that everything has to go in right up front. They have a level of financial commitment often to a publisher or investors that requires a certain level of success that is just extraordinarily difficult to maintain. I mean, if you have to sell 1 million units or 2 million units to even stay open, your feature set has got to compete with World of Warcraft and Star Wars: The Old Republic. So really, we just looked at it from a different angle. We thought, what if we could just take the very basic, most fun part of what it is we wanted to build, not focus on trying to build this large MMO infrastructure around it, but focus first on just getting the game right. Would that be enough? And what would it cost? And how much time would it take? And we felt we could get it done. We kind of set a target for having an alpha out in September, which we actually got out a little early. That helped out quite a bit. And then we actually were launching about a month after we thought, but that has a lot more to do with just making sure that we could get things lined up, I think, more on the marketing and sales side.
Sure. And from the conversations I had this evening, it's knowing where your partners are, how they can perform. And it's basically smart strategies, like smart planning for how the product goes. But I have also heard that you are the hardest working man in show business, that you require no sleep.
I certainly am reaching an age where I can't do this as well as I used to be able to. So it's certainly taken its toll. But yeah, I mean, you really just, with anything like this, if you're really passionate about what you want to do and you actually want to see it through, there's not a level. I don't think people necessarily succeed out of talent or genius or anything. You just work hard. I mean, that's everybody that we've got with us is just willing to throw in, and I'm certainly not alone in those hours. I mean, there's almost never a time where I'm working and there isn't somebody working with me on Skype. So yeah, it also helps that we're willing to do those 80 and 100-hour weeks for months on it.
Good grief.
You can check out the official website of Dark Vale Games at www.darkvalegames.com. That's DarkValeGames.com. You can find them on Twitter at Dark Vale Games. That's DarkValeGames. That's on Twitter at Dark Vale Games. You can also check them out on Facebook at www.facebook.com/PlayForgeWar. That's PlayForgewar.
Well, Anthony, I don't mean to cannibalize the whole thing.
Oh, that's no problem. And if you don't mind, Tim, now, one of the things that the Double Plus Good Games podcast has been very blessed with recently has been our recent relationship with Amazon.com. And we've, I've done some homework on Forge and Dark Vale Games. And with what you're telling me in regards to this, this crazy timeline, company coming together, from pre-concept to trying to release within the, first 12 months of the company being around, beta, et cetera, et cetera. If you don't mind me asking, how in that time frame did Dark Vale Games relationship spawn with Amazon? What is the relationship there?
Sure. Well, we set ourselves up to go to PAX, which is hilarious. We hadn't released an alpha yet, and we went ahead and got a booth and said we're going to go and put up a LAN and have everybody play at PAX with us. So it was another one of those, set things you have to accomplish, because otherwise you just got a lot of egg on your face. It would be kind of embarrassing to have a LAN and all you're doing is handing out cards. So while we were at PAX, someone from Amazon stopped by. They just literally walked by the booth, saw people playing the game, started playing, hadn't heard of us, started up a conversation with a couple of us there. And one thing led to another, and a really good relationship developed. I mean, I know Amazon is they're aggressively moving into the digital download space for games, and I know that that's where the large majority of the growth is coming in gaming outside of consoles. So smart move on their decision, and so far, whenever they decide to go into a market, they tend to do very, very well in it. So it was a good partnership from our perspective as well.
Now, if you don't mind me asking, Forge has been described as a, quote, class-based multiplayer shooter. Can you please give a brief definition of what that means exactly for listeners who may not be as well versed in that terminology?
Yeah, we were trying to, it's actually probably been the most difficult task as far as like telling people about Forge, is to come up with some phrase or some acronym that actually describes the game. We looked at it, and really the only thing we could think of is to kind of look at it from the perspective of like Team Fortress 2, in that you choose a class, you choose a role. So instead of everybody being the same, like say in Counter-Strike, a game a lot of people are familiar with, or Call of Duty, where everybody kind of runs around, you all have rifles and you do pretty much very similar things, you just change your weapons. The roles in Forge, you choose a class and your role is very, very different. An assassin plays very differently from a shaman. Shamans are all about healing and team support, and assassins are all about sort of lone wolf type of pick off the stragglers play. So it's class-based in that sense, in that you choose a role, and there are 5 very distinctly defined roles at launch. The 6th coming soon, the Ravager class. And the 7th coming not too far after that, the Tinker. And when we say shooter, even though you're not using weapons, we looked at all the games in sort of this genre where they have healers and tanks and DPS and all of that. And we didn't like tab targeting. We didn't like click the target. The problem is that you get into these large groups, and target switching becomes really difficult because the tab targeting kind of relies on some AI based on proximities and that sort of thing. And you can end up with 3 guys. You want to hit the one in the middle, and you hit tab, 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 and it just bounces between 2 that you don't want to hit.
Right.
So we were trying to think at the pace of gameplay that these games have, that really, where the skill starts to separate itself, becomes that ability to make really quick decisions and to know that you need to stun this guy, hit this guy, stun this guy again, that sort of thing. We wanted to be able to kind of enhance that through the targeting system. So we opted on a modified version of a first-person shooter targeting scheme. So if you're in melee distance, it uses something more like Assassin's Creed. And that it's sort of an action game. It's got very forgiving sort of lock mechanisms, but at the same time, it's kind of a fan in that the most precise element of your targeting is who it's going to pick. So if you have 3 people in that very loose, forgiving area, but the one in the middle is the one you were most closely targeting on, that's the one it's going to hit. So it allows you to very precisely pick people out and use your abilities. So while you're not always shooting arrows or projectiles, sometimes you're using abilities to just instantly appear on the other target. It does use a first-person shooter sort of interface to choose your targets.
And we talked about that at the start of the show. When I had originally looked at Forge, and you get the screenshot, looks at screenshots, I kind of assumed it would be a little bit more like an MMO. You had the icons at the bottom, you had the character lower third person over the shoulder. But when I got to play it, the games that came to mind were definitely like Unreal, Team Fortress, and to your point of the different classes, it reminded me of Shadowrun.
Yeah, yep, yeah. A lot of people that played Shadowrun have definitely. I loved the game. I made the comparison. We also sometimes if somebody looks really confused, we're like, well, think of it like Skyrim but multiplayer. You actually have fantasy characters, not dudes with weapons. Not dudes with shotguns and stuff. They're fantasy characters who are doing fantasy things, but you interact with the world in this first-person way. And what's really nice about that, another thing that kind of exposed itself that we didn't realize up front, but we realized as we were developing, so we started to build more and more of that into the game, is that once you move there, the game can become very, very vertical. You lose that necessity because of the isometric viewpoint that works best for those MMO-type targeting systems and everything. You can't really go very vertical in those because you're always looking through floors or something like that. But when you're going in first person, where we can treat your camera like your eyes, we can go very vertical with the maps. We can apply effects to the camera that actually sort of make it feel like if the Pathfinder hits you with blinding arrow, it actually blinds you. Like you go blind to the camera. So elements like that were a positive side effect.
If you kind of alluded to this a little bit ago when you touched base on the classes and whatnot. Now, I know from a little bit of reading I did in advance, I don't want to sound like a cheater, but I would like you to describe to fans a little bit about Dark Vale Games' thoughts on the leveling up system, which I know isn't even really the term that you like to have go around. What are your thoughts on the traditional leveling up system? Is it something that's become dated, antiquated? And then in regards to whatever you've done with leveling up system, so to speak, is this something that all comes into play in the end for making that perfect balance for your game, something that seems to be very important?
Yeah, I mean, I think the one method of leveling up that has grown stale enough that I don't know if people are really... I don't know if they're going to embrace it the way that they used to. It's just the old, you start at level 1, you gain abilities and power, where you become ever more powerful, and they just continuously move the goalpost. You reach 50, fantastic, great. It's 60 the next expansion, then it's 70, then it's 80. And really, when you look at it, the amount of time that it takes to level up in a Western RPG, MMORPG, 3-4 weeks of kind of normal play. After that, you're playing the full game at the normal, even level anyway. So since the majority of time is spent at that even level, sort of even power balance, but as the game grows and gets older, it becomes more and more difficult to get new people in because it takes longer and longer to reach the cap, because you have 4 weeks to get to the 50, then you've got 2 weeks to get to the 60, and another 2 weeks to get to the 70. It just separates and divides people. So then they start putting in gear grinds, and gear grinds replace the leveling grind, and they keep those going in between levels. And it just, if you watch Family Guy, there's an early episode where Peter and Quagmire, they're all at this house watching this Statue of Liberty video that they mistakenly thought was something more interesting. And they play the beer game, and he's like, all right, you win. What do I win? Another beer. It's the same thing with levels. It's like, yes, I hit cap. What do I get? The leveling experience. I mean, there's no sort of end to it. It doesn't really provide anything other than the thing itself, and that's not much of a reward.
I completely understand with that, and that was one of the reasons I left World of Warcraft. Is that at a certain point, I believe it was when I got my mount, I hit level 60. I think it's when I was level 40 when I got my mount. It's been a while. I had kids, and then World of Warcraft went away forever. But once I got my mount, I sat and I'm like, now what? Now I can do more of this faster because I can go from place to place. And so at a certain point, and then, of course, with the separators and dividers is one of the things that is kind of pushing people to buy games day one, like Halo just this last week. If you didn't buy it day one and start leveling up, and you go into multiplayer without guns or you are going to be at a severe disadvantage, and that's going to inhibit your experience with play.
Yeah, we were just around the office. We would, we got more than a few Star Wars fans. So Star Wars: The Old Republic lands. I picked it up first, and I got to. It wasn't very high, but I don't know, 20 or 30. Told one of my friends at the office about it. He liked it. He started a character, and unless I stopped playing the character I liked, played a different one while I caught up, we were never going to play together. It was going to take us months to where we were in the same realm, and it's just odd. I mean, like these games grow best whenever you can just tell somebody about it and they can jump in. So, we'd play something instead like Team Fortress 2, but the difference there is it's shotguns. It's shotguns, and it's a very, very fun game, but it wasn't the experience we were looking for. So we really tried to blend the two. Our opinion on progression on leveling up is that options are great. Everybody loves to customize. Everybody wants their character to be theirs. So it becomes really important to find a way to give someone something to work towards. Because the thing that does still work about leveling up is that people love to collect. I mean, I'm one of the most... I have like the strongest addictive personality on the planet. Like I can get completely hooked into something and I have to have everything. It doesn't matter if 5 of them are useless. I want those 5 as well. I can't stop until it's complete. And while not everybody is quite that extreme, everybody does like that. I've got a reason why I'm coming back beyond just this is fun to play. Like you have to have that hook. So we looked at how we could take a game like Forge that we wanted to be balanced from level 1 to level 99 and provide something to work towards. And one of the first things that we started looking at was just all of the different aspects of combat that we have that have been balanced out one against another between the classes, and to see if there's some variance inside of a class that keeps it in its role, allows someone to sort of specialize it. On top of that, when you only have 9 abilities, it really helps. Instead of having 55, where you need and 3 options per, you have hundreds of different abilities to choose from. When you have 9, you can actually come up with very slight variants that appeal to someone and provide them the method of customizing that way. So what we've done with Forge is as you level up, you're able to shift from speed to armor, or from either one of those to increase your resource cap, and at certain level thresholds, you gain ability focuses. And those allow you to shift your ability just slightly more towards your taste. An example would be stealth for the assassin. Stealth for the assassin right now, we have it built such that there's no duration. There's very little benefit, like damage-wise, to going into stealth. The main benefit is just becoming very difficult to target, able to sort of get around somebody from behind them or even escape. So we built 3 other options. One of them is for speed. One of them allows you to bring friends in with you. And another one provides a lot more bonus for going into stealth that has a duration. So all 3 of those they stay within that balanced framework because they're all sort of built off of the base. But at the same time, everybody's able to customize and sort of get the character that they want.
That must take a tremendous amount of playtime. Where do you find the time to do that?
Yeah, that's why I pretty much, until this is out and things are rolling and we can bring in some more hands to help. It takes a lot of time. And it's a significant amount of time, and then somewhat too. Once you start getting used to doing that process for 5 or 6 abilities, it helps sort of give you a framework on which to take others that's similar directions, and you'll be okay. Like where you start to get into a lot of trouble is if you take the functionality too far from its base, and then you start getting combinations that are just too good. So we're pretty conservative on the focus side, but just unconservative, unconservative, whichever it is, enough to allow people to feel like their character is theirs.
I see a lot of arena style game in Forge. I see a lot of League of Legends. I see a lot of Wrath of Heroes, and I've read a lot of particularly you. I've read a lot of your interviews, and I've not really seen a lot of that mentioned, and I'm just curious, is that also something that you guys have experience with and then included it, or is it sort of just something that came up because this is the nature of the beast?
Yeah, we've got a variety of experience. I played I was not at the level of some of the guys we've had help us. I'm not a gladiator or tourney winning player, but I was playing in the 2,000 to 2,400 brackets in WoW arenas and playing around in those games for a long time. It's been several years playing each, and that certainly influenced a lot of what I felt was good and bad with class design decisions. And then we've got other guys here that have played professional level FPS, some very high rated League of Legends and Dota players had influence as well. It was sort of looking at what were those elements that, not necessarily to build a Frankenstein, but like, if you make a really good lasagna and that sauce is amazing, like you can use that same sauce in spaghetti or something else, right? I mean, it's kind of the same thing. Like, what did we like about those things that actually fit with what we're trying to build? What class archetypes sort of appealed to us and felt solid rather than muddled? And so certainly I think those things tend to come out as you're playing, and especially when you look at a class like the Assassin. The Assassin is sort of our statement, our opinion on what a stealth class should feel like. We don't like burst openers, as common and popular as they are in most MMO titles. The trouble with them is that you burst open and then what? I mean, from that point on, your entire gameplay becomes trying to get back into stealth or just survive long enough. So what ends up
totally
happening,
agree. You burst open and then you're trying to catch up the rest of the match.
Yeah, and then as the game progresses, and instead of shifting away from the burst opener, they start giving more utility abilities, and then you end up with, World of Warcraft's rogue that has recuperation and everything else, and essentially becomes a warrior. And that's just not. It doesn't feel stealthy anymore. Stealth becomes like whatever. I mean, it's great for the getting some surprise, but it's not really useful. So we went with a stealth that had no combat requirement. You could just pop in and out, and we thought of them more of like what you would imagine, Nightcrawler from X-Men. We just pictured that fighting scene where he's popping through the hallways, disappearing, appearing behind somebody. So the combination of stealth, shadow leap, shadow shift, being able to drag people into the realm, we wanted them to be difficult to kind of get your hands around when you're fighting them. They should always feel like they can get the upper hand on a single opponent, which meant we didn't have to make them stand up well in open combat. I mean, an assassin that sits out too long is going to get chewed to pieces. But they still play really well to the point of good player can be a real handful.
What I love hearing all day, and again, it's because I hit the event earlier this afternoon and then talking with you, is that when Super Genius was working on the design and their offices just loaded with art, they would work all day on art and then go home and paint. They would go home and illustrate and draw and design. Like, that's what they did for fun.
Yep.
What you seem to do is exactly, you build and you're putting together this architecture for gaming. Then you go home and you game. They work for art, then go home and art. You work for games, then go home and game. And I think that's phenomenal.
Yeah, I think it's Stephen King. Once he was giving a speech at a college, and students stood up and asked him what's the most important thing to being a writer, and his response was to be a reader. And I think it applies to gaming as well. I think if you don't play games, you're not going to build very good games. You're certainly not going to. You're going to find yourself surprised at things that have been tried and just don't work well. So yeah, I think it's important to. I think it's important to play not just your own, but a variety of them. I mean, there's a reason, you get a game, for instance, even something completely off the genre map like World of Tanks. There's a reason World of Tanks is extremely successful. And if you don't play it and sort of mine out why, you're going to miss out on some things that could be really useful.
Now, may I ask you a question, Tim, here?
Yeah.
And this is not meant to be ignorant or disrespectful on my part. I'm on Amazon.com. And what exactly, right now on Amazon, they have it on sale. You can get Forge, and it's called a 2-pack. Have you seen this?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's why I want to get one.
Now, this is, what does that get you if you download it right now?
If you buy one, get one, you get 2 copies of Forge, which essentially gives you all non-cosmetic content for the life of the game. So there's no subscription fee. It's just a one-time purchase. The expansion packs and DLC that we'll be releasing, as if, for instance, Ravager. The Ravager class could come with a faction. And if it came with a whole new faction, the whole new faction would just completely shift the theme of the characters. From right now, we're showing one faction, the Vaklandir. They're kind of Nordic, Viking-ish, animalistic sort of a culture. The next culture coming out is the Mopachi, and the Mopachi are Clockwork Mayan. So everything about them changes. They look much more sort of ancient robotic, very South American flavor, South Central American flavor. So the cosmetic part of it, faction part, would be a purchase. You're not going to be able to play the Mopachi unless you spend extra money. But if the Mopachi came with an extra class, the class becomes enabled in the Vaklandir faction for free. So you're never going to be limited from games. You're never going to have a class you can't play. Never going to have a map you can't load. All of that stuff is free if you buy one time, and the buy one get one gets you 2 copies.
Now, do you mind if I take about 2 minutes here and do a nice little plug here off Amazon.com for Forge?
No, not at all.
So, listeners, you want to go to Amazon.com and search for Forge by Dark Vale Games. They have some great deals going on right now as we speak. You don't want to hesitate. You can get the 2-pack edition of Forge on sale now, as well as you have the opportunity to check out the 4-pack. Both respective versions on sale now, sold by Amazon Digital Services. And I'm also going to read a few quotes to you in regards to what some of the other top sites and other top guys out there are saying about Forge. Games Radar says, Forge looks like it'll be a great romp for gamers looking to test their skills without investing hours into acquiring gear before they can compete. MMORPG.com says, face-punchingly good PvP. I can tell you that while Forge may be difficult to describe to the uninitiated, its gameplay will be instantly comfortable to aficionados of the MMO and FPS/TPS genres. Massively says, there's a lot to love about Forge, and I think that anyone who gives the game a fighting chance will find something about it to keep him around. I think Forge definitely deserves our attention. And finally, Penny Arcade, our friends at Penny Arcade say, it's every bit Team Fortress 2 as it is World of Warcraft, but somehow it all feels tight and solid in design. Classes feel balanced, gameplay is smooth and familiar, and the overall visual aesthetic is rich in detail and life. So you want to check that out, go to Amazon.com right now. Don't miss out on Forge. Get all the goodies now. Get ahead, buy 2. You get 2 for 1. You don't want to miss it.
No, there you go. See, Tim, you get all of this absolutely free. So
it's incredible.
That's the thing. Like when we were talking about earlier that you are gamers building games for yourself. And you're basically like the Criterion Collection for games. So like the people that he mentioned, Games Radar, you've got Penny Arcade, the people that actually have been playing games, who've been in the games industry for a long time, have been, have several different experiences, not just the first person shooter experience. They all have nothing but excellent things to say about it. From an artistic perspective, when I saw it and when I got the hands on with it, it took me by surprise. And that's hard to do. I can try to compartmentalize it as, well, it's an FPS. It's like I was trying to figure out a way to tell Anthony it was like RE4 a little bit because of the over-the-shoulder perspective. But I'm having difficulty trying to put my finger on it. And I believe that you're creating games that, because of your love of games, are appealing with hardcore gamers. I hate to even, I don't even want to use that term. I'm going to edit that out. I'm so mad at myself for saying hardcore gamer. I'm going to kick my own ass. What is wrong with me?
Off on you, huh?
But it's got to feel great to know that you are doing the right thing by gamers.
I mean, we certainly hope so. Because we're not the, we're not industry rock stars that have names that instantly get dropped around. So what we really set off to build was what we wanted to find and couldn't. I mean, that's really been the basis of the 3 games that we had in mind that we could start with. Is we want to play this. It doesn't yet exist. So let's make it. I mean, maybe there's always that fear that maybe you would get to the end and find out, well, here's all the reasons why nobody made this, because it's terrible. but that just hasn't been the case. I mean, we've built something we enjoy playing. We've built something that we want to play, and there came a certain point to where really the time it takes to develop, taking away from gameplay, kind of gives you a little bit of a sad face. Seeing behind the curtains, it takes away just a little bit. That sort of makes you sad because it's definitely something that we love playing. But we're at that stage where all you see are the flaws. Like everything that we get in and we play and we're having fun, but we're constantly like, we need to tweak this. And gosh, I really wish we had a guy that was doing this instead of me. Because if a professional were doing this, it would look this way. So yeah, it's been great to see people actually respond really positively to it. I think one of the things that we tell a lot of people, especially like the really young players that come in and have no frame of reference from some of the old games, is like this is what it felt like to play games back when I started. Like that's the feeling I had when I would play them. Whenever I would jump into the first Unreal or the first Half-Life or the first Quake, like the Quake 3 Arena was so simple. It was so pure. Quake 3 Rocket Arena, sorry. So simple, so pure. Like you got all your weapons, you jumped in. But I spent so many hours. Counter-Strike has been at the top of my hours played list, for a long time because of those years. And it's all the games now they're like either cinematic movie experiences or they have these artificial, strange leveling systems tacked on that really do nothing more than just give you a way to use your time to beat down somebody else. It just feels very different from the type of games that I got hooked on the industry from. So we tried to build something that was maybe a little more reminiscent of what got us hooked when we were younger.
Well, I'll tell you, the games that you mentioned, the litany of like Quake, you were talking about the ones that you were raised on or the ones you grew up on. Every one of those is a phenomenal game to draw from, whether it be Half-Life 2 or the Quake series, which really, I remember when that first hit, it revolutionized everything. And Anthony, that's so crazy. We were just talking about this today. We did a Halo 4 midnight launch show, and
live and in the flesh, baby.
Yeah, exactly. And the kids 15 to 17 years old couldn't grasp the concept that in Doom that you couldn't look up or down. Right.
I was explaining the progression of I was talking about how ancient I was, and we were talking about FPS, and they said, "Oh, you must have played Doom." And I said, "Oh, yeah." And then I explained to them, I got a little nerdy, and I explained how Doom used sprite-based enemies, whereas, the environments primarily were polygonal. And, when you rotated around the fallen sprites, so to speak, they would rotate with you, and they were not done in true 3 dimensions. And then not until Quake came along could one look up and down, and they kind of chuckled. And, they thought about it for maybe a half a second, and they said, well, pretty much this generation reaps the benefits of the past generations. And that was pretty accurate.
Yeah. I mean, it's incredible to think that one of the moments I can remember the first time I got into like a video card, like buying the old Voodoo card.
Yes.
Is to get transparent water in Quake.
Nice. Holy moly.
Like, I remember I found this site, which, may it rest in peace because now it's, I think, only updated on Fridays, but Voodoo Extreme.
Wow.
And,
oh, yeah.
Oh, my God. Billy. I mean, it was fun to read. It was crazy, but it had like the best 3D assets, the best 3D resources to find like patches and modifications to make use of that card. And that was really when I went from just kind of occasionally picking up a game to being, I don't know, I guess just kind of in love with what the industry could do.
Well, I'll tell you something ironic in a way now. Correct me if I'm wrong. Forge utilizes the Unreal 3 graphics engine, correct?
Mm-hmm.
And while we're going off on this little tangent here, reminiscing, like you see, going from Doom to Quake and what you've said about transparent water and upgrades for Quake, I have to confess, the game that really, like when I saw it at home and it was not running at its full performance because of the PC I had, but the game that made me just go, I can't believe where the visuals are, was the original Unreal.
Yeah.
I also couldn't believe in Craig. I think you could even see like the birds flying in the sky, and if you were good enough, you could shoot them out of the sky. And I mean, I was just stunned. I thought the water. I thought it looked real.
Yeah, it was incredible, and they did things with the lighting that just hadn't been done. That Scarge hallway scene.
Uh-huh.
Like, are you kidding me? Like, it was such, yeah. It was amazing.
Is that the one where the dead body gets dragged out of the cave or something like that?
Yeah, and then so it gets dragged through a hallway.
Wow.
And then after you see after you see the body go away, the light goes off one after another.
Wow.
And as the lights are coming off towards you, a Scarge starts running, and it's like seen, not seen, seen, not seen, like strobe kind of for a second. It was fantastic.
It wasn't until games like that, especially being at such a young age myself, and I didn't understand a lot of the techie terms and jargon. I never realized the importance of light sourcing, as dumb as that may sound. And until I took a drawing class in school and it was explained to me on shading and, how, I know this sounds so, so rudimentary, but, where the light source comes in and where the light shines and it darkens in the other areas where the light, kind of, starts to disappear. But it wasn't until those kind of games like Quake and Unreal did I realize the difference lighting alone could make in a title.
Yeah. And now you look and you've got engines that, as far as graphics go, I mean, Unreal Engine 4, the latest Crysis and Crytek engine, oh my God. Like, it's, these are things that would have put cutscenes to shame.
Yeah.
And now it's all real time. It's all taken for granted.
That's the thing. And whereas you can get such visual and graphical fidelity, if you don't have the backbone of solid game mechanics that will draw people in, they'll be forgotten. Like what, Tears in the Rain? Is that Blade Runner line?
Yes.
It becomes like you can make it so beautiful, but there's nothing solid behind it. And I think that's what Forge and the game development philosophy that you're adopting, where you basically have to be a gamer in order to develop games that gamers are going to play in the future. I think that's where Dark Vale Games is pings and buzzers above other developers of today, whereas developers of today are competing for the next, you're right, 12 to 18 months of a cycle of like, how am I going to get this money? How am I going to get return on investment for this? You're building games that are tweaked, are game tested as they're being developed.
Yeah, and those guys that work at those companies, they love games very much as well. It's just that the business of building games at those scales has become so much different. A lot of the soul gets lost.
I agree. I absolutely agree. People who are developing games at Activision EA, they do love games. They wouldn't be in the industry if they didn't. However, you're absolutely right. When you can't say no for fear of your job.
It becomes really, really, I mean, they are put in some pretty impossible circumstances. And, some of the sad part, too, is even whenever they do build something amazing, like Red Dead Redemption, you build something and it does extremely well, but because of the scale of the business and the way that it needs to be run to operate, from what their goals are, which is a little bit different from what an indie like us can focus on. They cut people that have bled for it. And it's not, it doesn't feed well. Like, you start to kind of erode away at that passion for the industry. There's so many guys that have been at 10 to 15 years that you ask them, what do you want to do next? Banking. Like, I'm done with this. I have done all that I can possibly do. We were fortunate to not get put through the meat grinder before getting here. So we're still pretty much all. We've certainly gone through the process part. It's not as glamorous, but yeah, our love and passion and interest in the industry is still at a peak.
And we are extremely, extremely happy to hear that. We are extremely happy that you have not gone through the grinder, because people who are developing games like you, the passion you're putting into it, I am glad that has not been squeezed out of you like wine out of a grape.
Yeah. Well, and I think just because of the size of our company, it let us do something a little bit different in the MMO space, in that everybody already calls us an MMO, even though we are not really an MMO yet. And we're called an MMO because of the type of gameplay and because of the direction we're headed. But one of the things a lot of MMOs do today is if you look at the checklist of features that they need to hit, there's 1,000 of them before you even get to gameplay. So before the game is fun, there's 1,000 things you have to build that require hundreds of people working for a very long time to accomplish. And the trouble with that is that just getting all of those things solved, a lot of those are major engineering and technical challenges. A lot of them present you with delays and issues that come up, and you start siphoning people away. And then at the very end, you finally get down to the question of, is the game fun? And the answer very often is no. And that's a shame, because it's really just a matter of a lack of focus on whether the game is fun or not. It's like, I have an MMO. What's the game like? Oh, it's an MMO. I mean, it's as though it's self-describing, and it's really not. And we looked at that early and like, can we do this? Can we? It was a bit of a risk, but we thought, okay, we're going to build an MMO, but the MMO part's going to come after. First thing we're going to do is just build the part that everybody plays for fun and make that as great as we can possibly make it. Because building on those other features, that is a very known, very predictable path. You can, as long as you're selling copies of the game, you can fund and build those things in over time. If the core gameplay is great, you'll stand out. You'll actually, even though the market has Guild Wars 2, ArenaNet is incredible. Guild Wars 2, it has the latest World of Warcraft. You're not going to sink. You're not going to fall below the horizon, because if people will try it and play, they'll like it.
If you want to check out more on Dark Vale Games and Forge, go to Amazon.com. Amazon.com right now, better than ever, especially fourth quarter, the holiday season. If you haven't done so already, I know Neil's a member, and I'm going to be a member very soon. Amazon Prime, and then also Amazon.com Incorporated announced the launch of its Black Friday Deals store. Bonus! You can check it out at www.amazon.com/Black Friday, just like it sounds. The deals destination will feature a deal of the day, along with limited time doorbuster style lightning deals and other huge savings on the hottest electronics, toys, clothing, and more now through Black Friday weekend. Check it out. They have a link on the site. And once again, you can check it out at www.amazon.com/Black Friday. And I love the idea of this, because I tell you what, after Thanksgiving, I've got all that turkey in me. I'm tired. Just about the only thing I can do the next morning is power on my PC and, one-click shopping and roll right back into bed.
You live in a dream.
That's how I like it. So my personal favorite department on Amazon, they're free-to-play games. Find free games for PC and Mac. Shop for in-game items and have them sent directly to your game account using Game Connect. Game Connect is a revolutionary way to play instantly. Check it out. Amazon.com/free-to-play. That's FREE, 2 PLAY. Start gaming now.
I came up with a question as all this banter was going back and forth, and I was listening, and this is probably a question that's better placed elsewhere. So, Neil, if you can edit it in somewhere, I'm sorry for creating more work for you.
Don't tell me what to do.
I'm not. I'm asking.
Okay.
It's a question. I'm asking a question.
And I have good news for both you guys when you're done.
But
Sure.
Tim, you specifically said that this is a game that you had wanted to play. Like, you wanted a fantasy type game that you could enter into, bring a friend along, play, have a lot of fun. And I've been playing Forge for the past, I guess, couple weeks. I've been having a blast with it. I think it's absolutely fantastic. I love not having to worry about jumping into a game and being like, oh, well, I hope it matched me with some level appropriate people. Otherwise, I'm going to get destroyed. I love not having to worry about that. You just jump in and you play. And if you want to play with friends, you play with friends. But you guys really kind of hit that middle road. And it's striking that you're the only ones to have done it, at least that I've seen. There are more than one, quote unquote medieval fantasy combat games being developed right now. But yours is like really honest to God fantasy with pyromancers and shaman and the different factions that you guys have. What made you stick more to high fantasy than low fantasy? What made you go, okay, yeah, we want fireballs from fingertips. We want blinding shots, and we want a guardian who can run in and absorb a lot of damage, as opposed to the chivalries and the War of the Roses?
That came down to sort of that opinion of if we sit around the office and ask people like what they remembered about the last 10 years of playing, it wasn't so much, I mean, we've all enjoyed some Sims and stuff like that, but really the things that stand out in our mind are just like Rocket Arena, mastering those rocket jumps, or in Half-Life 1, the Gauze gun, like getting really good at bouncing that thing off the ground, jumping in the air and sniping somebody. Just that feeling of the game isn't taking itself too seriously. Like you can get extremely skilled with it, but the game does not think it is the next documentary on, you know, on whatever it is that it's covering. Like it's not trying to be a Song of Fire and Ice. You know, we're not trying to sort of cover this deep, rich, you know, run around and then butcher it by making you hunt boars for five hours straight. You know, so we really just wanted to build something that was fun. And to get to the fun level, you know, they weren't launching a whole lot of middle-of-the warriors out of catapults, and your horses couldn't jump 30 feet in the air, and you really can't snipe with a bow. I mean, it was just, there were so many things with that type of combat that just didn't, it's fun in its own way, but it wasn't the type of fun that just made us laugh. And that ability to feel like you, I don't know, it's sort of that mix of not only being able to step on somebody's throat and get that real visceral feeling of I just kicked your ass, but then to be able to laugh about the method that it happened on both sides. Like if you molten bola somebody 500 yards away because you just caught the timing just perfect in their shield storm, and they go flying off, and that little last bit of health, they die from the fall damage, both of you laugh. I mean, he just died, but it's funny. And it was just being able to get those kind of abilities out. It just required high fantasy. Not to mention, it really broadens the type of classes you can bring in. The class roles can become extremely distinct. We have 12 to 13 planned that feel completely different from one another, and they all require things that are just not realistic. The Ravager, for instance, if you could mix, any of you guys, you know, either currently or when younger, read any of the Salvatore books that had those, I can't remember the name of the dwarves now, but they were berserkers. They would just cover themselves in spikes, and they killed people by hugging them to death. Like their battle tactic was just to grab onto people and shake until they died. If you could mix that with Spider-Man, you have the Ravager. So
that sounds like the best class ever.
So we're intentionally animating him to fight like Yoda in the latest Star Wars, so that he's really small, doing a lot of flips, very acrobatic, very meaty character, able to kind of stand in melee, but his mobility ability is a grappling hook that works the way that Spider-Man flies around. So you can latch on to players, you can latch on to world environments. You can essentially use it to drag yourself to people, or people to you, or to places in the world, including teammates, that sort of thing.
Now, do you constantly have to keep moving? And I understand if you can't get too much into the class, but do you constantly have to keep moving, or can I say like latch to the ceiling and just wait for someone to walk below me and surprise?
That much detail we probably don't have 100% worked out.
Gotcha.
That is the Quake 2 grappling hook strategy.
Yes.
That's the best strategy to ever come out of any game ever, by the way.
So we know your time is extremely valuable. I want to make sure we go through all the questions. Anthony, do we have any?
You know what? I'm just about done, because in one way or another, even though some of the questions did not get asked directly, it was mentioned and discussed via other avenues. So before I ask the final question, if you don't mind, Tim, I'm going to give a little plug here. It's going to be a little bit different.
Sure.
If you can't wait for early December 4th, and you know, you've got itchy keyboard fingers, go to Amazon.com, search Forge by Dark Vale Games, get in on the sale. There's the 2-pack and the 4-pack as discussed earlier. And just as a refresher, Forge is an online class-based multiplayer shooter set in a unique fantasy setting. The Forge Starter Edition pre-order includes, and this is for the 2-pack, the Founder's Title, invite to the currently active closed beta, a digital download copy of the retail version of Forge on release. And here's a little bit of background. A malicious being named the Devourer has swallowed the great pantheon of gods. Seeking escape, the trapped gods have deceived great warriors, zealous adherents, and placed them on a faceless world called Forge. Designed sacrificed the weakest of these warriors in order to grow their own power. Choosing one of 5 unique warrior classes, the player must battle head-to-head with other players in a bid to free their god from the clutches of the Devourer. Armed with a set of powerful and unique abilities, as well as a powerful and deadly ally, each warrior must overcome the very challenges of Forge, where every kill is a sacrifice, and every sacrifice brings them one step closer to freedom. Hop onto Amazon.com now. Get your pre-order in. You don't want to miss this great deal and this future classic from Dark Vale Games.
What's great about that is you just did that off the top of your head. You're brilliant.
I would just also like to recommend that if their fingers still itch after playing Forge, Amazon probably also sells a lotion or a cream to help with that.
Talking about Amazon Prime, free shipping 2 days.
So, the only thing I have left for Tim here is what can we expect in the future from Dark Vale Games?
Well, certainly Forge will expand to include a lot of the MMO and metagame qualities that we wanted to bring to the title from the start. So Labyrinth mode is probably the one we're most eager to talk about. That is coming soon-ish, like in the next 6 months. And that effectively, if you played Left 4 Dead 2, you kind of get the team makeup, but instead of it being zombies, it's a raid boss and his minions versus Forge characters, where the players.
Oh, that's so cool!
I have been the whole podcast. I have been keeping my tabs on Left 4 Dead and Left 4 Dead 2. There have been so many instances where I could bring that up, and I held back. And bam! At the end, he drops the Left 4 Dead bomb.
Yeah, that's the mode we wanted to launch with, but it was one of those difficult discipline moments that just coming up with not only the classes but also the animated raid bosses and that sort of thing. We just didn't have the budget or time. So that is one that will follow though about 6 months out. And we're going to start off with Lick and Frost Giant and various minions and 3 maps dedicated to it. And that will sort of start off the metagame, the actual MMO infrastructure around what we're going to be providing for Forge.
That's excellent. Now, I hope after December 4th, you will get some rest.
I hope so, too.
Take the rest of the year off.
Then get back onto that DLC.
Exactly, because I want that labyrinth now.
I will take at least a fourth of the remainder of the year off. At least a fourth of the remainder of the year.
Tim, I can't tell you how much I appreciate you spending the hour with us. It's been fantastic.
Yeah, I enjoyed talking with you guys. I really appreciate it as well.
It was a pleasure, Tim, and we'd love to have you on in the future again.
The Double Plus Good Games Bonus Round podcast featuring Dark Vale Games' own Tim Alvis and Link Communications.
Goodbye.